Okay. Why'd you guys call this meeting anyway? So, anyway, I really appreciate the chance to be here. I'm excited today. I work for the American Friend, and Lida works for the American Friends Service Committee. It's an organization started by the Quakers a little over 100 years ago. And we're going to go down and do some introductions. I'll tell you a little bit about our organization. Quakers, we're actually Episcopal, but we work for a Quaker organization. Quakers kind of sort of accidentally invented the penitentiary a couple centuries ago, and we've been trying to make up for it ever since because it didn't work out too well. I think the idea originally, there's a place, if you ever go to Philadelphia, Eastern State Penitentiary, where they believe that if you took people and kind of kept them by themselves in a quiet environment, that people would, repent and reflect on their things and become better people, and it didn't quite work out that way. So this is an issue that we've been working on and concerned for a long time. Lida and I work on other issues like healthcare, poverty, state budget, and taxes and things, but this is an issue where so many things connect and interact that a lot of our attention's been on it lately. So we'll pass the torch.
Okay. My name's John Kemet Shabazz L, and I came in contact with Lisa Sheppard as a result of I was seeking counsel or seeking an attorney to assist me in a wrongful arrest that I had in Pennsylvania up at the WVU Law Center. And he, after hearing my background, he recommended that I get in contact with an organization in Charleston that was advocating for criminal justice reform. And in discussing my background with him, I did let this law professor know I was trying to get his help on an unlawful arrest. I let him know that I had been incarcerated myself previously, and as a result of the West Virginia Supreme Court's decision in State versus Randall back in 1988, my conviction was reversed by the state's highest court. And during that period of time while I was incarcerated 12 years up at the state's prison in Moundsville from 1984 up until 1994. And I learned to litigate for myself in the prison law library. I learned about prison conditions. And all of these things were done not because I wanted to, but they were done out of necessity because I had been sentenced to life without mercy. I was like 18, 19 years old. And the lawyers, they had difficulty dealing with me. And so they pretty much jumped ship. And I had to litigate myself. My first appeal of a life without mercy sentence was rejected by the Supreme Court. And I had to file a second writ myself from the jail law library with the assistance of a legal clerk there, a white guy. And it was a little difficult for me because here I was asking this white guy to help me, and he did. It didn't become a black or white issue, it became an issue about him being able to make sure that I got justice. And it helped educate me and let me know that everything is not a color thing, although color plays a part, but it's not the only part. So I was able to get allies to assist me at that particular time. The Supreme Court reversed in 1988, and I eventually was let out in 1994. I went back to my church in Pennsylvania and did some community work as part of my reintegration process because I seen myself as I started preparing myself for release before I got out, okay? I never accepted incarceration. I didn't define myself as an inmate. I defined myself as a prisoner, and I studied and trained myself to express myself and conduct myself intelligently, as opposed to, if you have a problem with someone, you can't jump on everybody. You have to find a way to intelligently deal with it. So I had to develop myself, and I'm in favor, real quickly, I'm gonna pass this on to someone else. Real quickly, I must get on the record that during my time in the law library, I learned of various cases. Under West Virginia Code 62-13-1, rehabilitation is mandated in the state of West Virginia. And social workers, because it's mandated, that means and the same thing that it does with the state's education system. It must be thorough and efficient. You must set up a treatment, rehabilitation program that reintegrates him or her into a peaceful environment where they can become lawful citizens, raise a family, and have all the benefits that life has to offer. I'm going to pass this on because I could go longer on this, but I want to share the stage with someone else. So thank you.
I'm Judy Utley. I have been an active addict. I have been in prison. I am now 22 years of sobriety. I love an addict, and I am the mother of an addict who is now responsible for raising his 2 children. So I've done the whole circle. My passion is for the struggling addict. Throwing them in jail is not the good idea. Not that jail is not necessary, but there's got to be a different way of approaching this problem, because most of the prisoners are in there because they are active addicts, seeking any way to get their drugs. And now raising my grandkids, I see exactly what I put my mother through and my family through. So hopefully there's an alternative, something we can do to find a better way. And I'll give it to you.
Okay, thanks, Judy. My name is Lida Sheppard, and I work with Rick in the American Friends Service Committee. And this is actually our first time all presenting together. I actually hadn't met Judy yet before today. I hadn't met John yet in person, so it's nice to actually finally be in each other's presence, because actually how I had met John was, and indirectly kind of Judy too. And I'll say one thing about why there's people filming here. It's a little bit related. They're from WVU Reed College of Media, and they've been doing an ongoing video project around the issue of incarceration, a project called Women Beyond Bars. And so they've been sort of documenting some of the work that we've been doing around not only lifting up people's stories, but also what is some of the work going on around criminal justice reform at the state legislature. So that's why they're here filming. And so that's actually how I got to know John and Judy as well, is that we passed something around about a listening project that we had been doing for the last, it wrapped up earlier this year, and we're going to be releasing sort of the full report of it, but we have been talking to folks, had a team of volunteers kind of documenting what people's experiences are of the criminal justice system, whether as a parent of someone who has been incarcerated or someone who's actually been incarcerated themselves. And so that's some of what we're going to cover today, are some of the themes that we've been hearing on sort of the front end, just hearing people's either life story, but then what was their experience when they first interacted with the justice system, what was their experience while incarcerated, what are the conditions in prisons, in jails, and then what happens when you're released, what are some of the things that you've been hearing from people. So I think we're relatively kind of loose how we present, and so certainly welcome any input at any point if people have questions, or so we want this to, we'll be not too rigid about it. But Rick, did you want to, before we maybe get into this, talk about perspectives?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many issues that intersect with this issue of mass incarceration, obviously race and class, poverty, trauma, and it intersects with many other aspects of life, like addiction, reentry, even the state and federal taxes and budgets. The money we spend on locking people up could be spent on many other things other than that. The damage that's done collaterally, the fact that the damage that's done over a life course, if someone's incarcerated earlier in life, can have huge effects down the line on their employment, their assets, their family relationships, and everything else. And so many people have been incarcerated in the country and around the state. And Lida and I have a sort of a geeky, wonky part of this. We do lobbying and advocacy about this. And so with a problem this big, we think it's good to look at it from a bunch of different angles. We need the voices of people directly impacted. If there's good data in social science, I think we need that too. We need community advocates, educators, public defenders. There's so much here to be done. So that's sort of the perspective we're bringing to it.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, so we'll kind of be going through this in a couple different parts, and one big prison yard, which is a Bob Dylan reference, but anyway, we'll get to that. Trends in West Virginia, just sort of look at some of the data in West Virginia, but also nationally as well, of just what when we're talking about mass incarceration, like what does that look like, even just by the numbers, and then also we'll kind of lift up some of the themes, and then we'll kind of move into what we are hoping to see happen at the legislature and otherwise. Here, do you want this clicker thing around?
Clicker thing. I was hoping, I like having a clicker thing with like the laser point, so it'd be like a cat toy. We can all chase the red dot. But
like, see who among you is like, the most cat-like, if you can't help it.
But unfortunately we don't, so we'll just
Yeah.
have to make do. That is the lyric. George Jackson is a song. Sometimes I think this world's one big prison yard. And while we're speaking this, I'm going to sort of look at what some social scientists and researchers have said about this over the years. There's been a lot of study and a lot of reflection on this. I think it's good to step back. Sometimes you get so close to a problem, it's good to get a little distance and perspective. And I love this quote by Friedrich Nietzsche. He's kind of a wild man, a great mustache, don't you think? A little scary. But this is like the issue why, incarcerating people is not necessarily a good idea, because when you punish people, when you warehouse people, when all this stuff is coming at you from the outside, as Nietzsche said, it can make people hard and cold. Concentrates, sharpens the feeling of resistance. When people get in there, they often undergo experiences that make reentry really problematic. And that's something we need to think about every time someone gets incarcerated at all. What kind of future trauma and damage are we setting up? So one of the most famous studies and reflections about the history of mass incarceration, does anybody know where I'm going to go with this? There's this foo-foo French philosopher named Michel Foucault who wrote a really famous book called Discipline and Punish. And he sort of traced the development of punishment over a few centuries. And in the Middle Ages, if someone offended a king, they were liable just to be torn to pieces on the rack, right? And we don't do that so much officially anymore. I think it happens unofficially. But over time, we've moved to a system of discipline, control, and surveillance. And that system of surveillance has been called a panopticon. It's like a system where we can be seen all the time, but we can't see the people who are watching us. And if you're on Facebook or social media, and just the video cameras everywhere, more and more of the world outside the carceral system is based on that kind of surveillance. So that's where the geeky term panopticon comes from. But more and more